In the last session, I did talk about yeah. Good. In the yesterday session, I did talk about what we learned from core Java, as well as what we learned from advanced Java, and also what we learned from framework. So I given a brief idea on these three concepts. In core Java, we learn how to write syntaxes in Java, how to develop programs in Java, okay, and what are the whoops concept, how to use those whoops concept to developing our applications. But also we learn exception handling, multi-threading, collection framework, string handling, wrapper classes, packages, all these type of basic things we learn in the core Java. But if it comes to the advanced Java, in advanced Java, mainly we are dealing with two things. One is communicating with the databases, and the second one is developing web applications. So in advanced Java, mainly we've seen three types of technologies like JDBC, servlets, and JSP. Then what are the problem with the advanced Java? Lot of boilerplate of code. For example, if you want to interacting with the database, we keep on writing this type of coding. This is one of the scenario, like this lot of scenarios we have. Loading the driver, creating the connection object, creating the statement object, creating the prepared statement object, executing the query, and getting the response in the result set format, and after that closing the connection. To avoiding these type of things, we went into what here? Frameworks concept, ORM based frameworks. And if it comes to the advanced Java, like servlets concept, whenever we want to read data from the browser, I want to read and use the logging details or any other information, then we are writing always this type of code. Every programmer in every application, in every project, in every company, people are writing this type of boilerplates of code. That's why we went into what here? Frameworks concept. And also, if you see, compared to the servlets, by using JSP, by writing minimal code, nothing but less code, we can able to develop web application, and a user interface we can able to develop. But internally, again, it will converting into what? Servlets itself. So in the background, there is a little performance issue. To overcome these limitations, we went to what here? Frameworks. Like if we want to develop web type of applications, web applications, we have struts and JSF. And if you want to communicating with the persistent stores, we have frameworks like a Hibernate, Toplink, and Eclipse, and all these things. Will you please mute your systems? It's my request. Okay, whenever you join into the Zoom meeting, will you please check whether your video is on or not, whether your system is in a mute mode or not. If you are unmute, will you please in the mute? Other people are disturbing and our normal flow of the class will be disturbed. So will you please take care about this one? Yeah, so these are the points we covered in the last session. These are the points we covered in the last session. Sir, what are we? Last session means yesterday. That is our first session. So today is our second session. Sir, what are we going to learn in this session? In today's session, we are mainly focusing on Spring, mainly focusing on Spring. Sir, we joined for SpringBoot. Then why do we learn Spring? See guys, learning Spring Boot is nothing but a different way of learning Spring only. Developing application on top of Spring Boot is nothing but developing applications and different way of developing Spring applications only. Please keep this point in our mind. We are not learning any separate course. We are learning a separate approach to developing Spring based applications. So please remember this point. So if you want to learn, if you want to understand the beauty of Spring Boot, first we have to understand the limitation of the Spring. Then only we can understand what we can calling as Spring Boot. So let me give you a quick understanding on top of the Spring. Later we will go for Spring Boot. Yesterday I told you, before Spring, we have two types of frameworks. Before Spring, we have two types of framework. What are those? What are those? Will you please give the reply? One is web framework. Another one is ORM based framework. One is web framework. Another one is ORM based framework. So with the help of web framework, we can able to develop only web layer and service layer. Web layer and service layer. So observe here, yesterday I drawn one small picture, web layer. Based on our requirement, our request will be handed over to particular class that is called web layer. Request handling. We will see in our Spring Boot how to handle the request. Okay, business layer. It is actually our project related code. It is actually our project related code. By using struts, we can able to develop only web layer and business layer. And if you are working with the ORM based framework, nothing but Hibernate, we can able to develop only database interaction layer. But if you want to develop both the type of logics, then we have third type of framework, that is application development framework. After Spring arrival into the market, frameworks are classified into three types. One is a web framework, another one is ORM framework, third one is application development framework. Once the Spring arrival into the market, nobody showing interest to learn web framework and ORM framework individually. Please mention that word clearly, individually. So people are learning web framework and ORM framework commonly in the form of Spring. So what is application? What is application development framework? And yesterday I told you, and today also I'm going to tell you, like every session is important to understand the beauty of Spring Boot. Every minute, every second is important. Okay, so don't be think like it is a basic session. No, it is our regular second session. Okay, now application development framework. What is application development framework? It is used to develop functionalities related to web and ORM frameworks. That means it is used to develop both service layer, you can also calling as business layer, another one is web layer and DAO layer. See, with the help of only web, we can able to develop only service and web layer. Web layer means request handling. Okay, after handling the request, actual logic is available in the service layer. Okay, more clearly we can understand in coming classes. Yesterday I given little understandability. In coming class we'll see more and more. So with the help of web framework, we can able to develop web layer and a service layer. For example, I want to make a request for inbox. I am clicking on inbox button. So inbox information will be displayed on the screen. Okay, that means based on our request, appropriate class will be handled. Based on a request, appropriate class will be executing. That concept is called web layer. So if I'm clicking on inbox, all my messages which are coming to my mail, those are be displayed. If I'm clicking on send mail, whatever the messages which I'm sending to other mails, those will be displayed. That means that is the actual logic of Gmail. So actual logic of any application is called business logic or service logic. So according to our requirement, appropriate classes will be executing. That is called web layer. Simply you can say like request handling logic. Simply you can say request handling logic. By using web framework, we can able to develop these two. By using ORM framework, we can able to develop DO layer. DO layer means data access object, nothing but database integration logic, nothing but communicating with the database simply. But if it comes to the application development framework, whatever the functionalities are doing by the web framework and ORM framework, everything we can able to do with the help of application development framework. So one of the application development framework like Spring currently, which one is the application development framework here? Spring. Application development framework is Spring. Okay, application development framework is Spring. Got it or not? So will you please observe here? It is used to develop functionality related to web and ORM framework. Web means we can able to develop both business layer and web layer, and ORM means we can able to develop DO layer or D2O layer also. Okay, now observe guys, carefully observe. One of the example like Spring. So with the help of the Spring, we can able to develop. With the help of the Spring, we can able to develop both. We can able to develop end-to-end. We can able to develop end-to-end logics of the application. End-to-end logics of the application, nothing but including with the presentation layer. Some presentation layer also we can able to develop with the Spring. We have a Spring tag library. By using Spring tag library, we can able to develop presentation. We can able to develop a web layer. We can able to develop service layer. We can able to develop DO layer. Once we starting our SpringBoot program, more and more clearly we are going to learn about learning about all these layers. What is the presentation layer? What is web layer? Each and everything I'm going to explain with example and with diagram, with example and with diagrams and with logic. Okay, don't worry. So how to use the Spring? How to use the Spring? Very simple. If you want to develop a end-to-end logics, we can use Spring. That means we can able to develop all the types of layers: presentation layer, web layer, service layer, as well as DAO layer also. Now observe carefully guys. Sir, Spring can do everything. Then why do we learn SpringBoot? Very simple concept. Let us understand. Let me give little idea on Spring again. Later we will go. So Spring is non-invasive framework. Spring is non-invasive framework. Let me write something. Spring is open source. Every point I'm going to give a clear cut idea. Spring is versatile framework. Spring is frameworks of frameworks. Spring is loosely coupled framework. So let us understand each and every word clearly. Later I will introduce SpringBoot. Everybody please concentrate. Up to learn what we understand about the Spring. Spring is a application development framework. With the support of the Spring, we can able to develop all the logics which are required for application. End-to-end means presentation, okay, presentation layer, web layer, service layer, we can also calling as business layer, and finally DAO layer. All the types of layers we can able to develop Spring. That's why Spring got this much of popularity in the market. That's why every company is willing to developing the project by using Spring. If the in Spring, that's enough. No need to bother about the remaining things. Only one course is sufficient. Only one framework is sufficient to develop entire project. Okay, that's why current trend is what here? Spring. No, sir, current trend is not Spring. Current trend is SpringBoot. See, current trend is SpringBoot only, but we are going to see little limitations in the Spring. That's why we are developing the applications on this SpringBoot. So in this course, from first program itself, I'm going to develop programs on top of the SpringBoot. The people who don't that much of idea on Spring, I'm going to conduct a separate batch for Spring. I think so in the next week, I'm going to start one new batch on Spring in the evening time. Don't bother. So here Ramchandra going to teach all the types of courses like core Java, advanced Java, Spring, SpringBoot, microservices with REST and cloud computing along with the real-time tools. So don't bother. Whatever the concept you required for developing the real-time projects, I'm going to help you. Clear? So Spring is open source framework. Basically, it was developed by Rod Johnson. It was developed by Rod Johnson in the year of 2009 itself. 2009 itself. Okay. No, sorry. 2000. See, basically versions like 2002, 2004. Let me give you clear cut idea. 2006. Okay. 2009 and 2013 and 2017. So in the before 2002 only, we have a 0.9. In 2002, Spring Framework first released came into the market. In 2002, Spring Framework released in the market. Okay, Spring 1.0, 2, 3, 4, like that, keep on using. Okay, now please be concentrate, guys. Please be concentrate. Okay, now observe clearly. In 2003, Spring has released, but nobody using. But from 2004, people has been using Spring to developing the application. Leave it about. So it was invented by or introduced by Rod Johnson for open source. Open source means, for example, I'm using Spring Framework to developing my projects. I'm using Spring to teach. See, if you observe my screen, this is entirely my Spring related programs. If you observe this screen, these are entirely SpringBoot related application, but I didn't pay any single rupee to what your pivotal company. So that means I'm using this software for free of cost. That is called open source. Everybody can use it without paying any single paisa. That is called open source. Okay, now let's come to invasive framework. This is very fundamental. No use. This is not useful for developing the projects. That's what I'm not concentrate on years actually. Now, if it comes to the Spring is non-invasive framework. That means, please be concentrate. Invasive and non-invasive frameworks. Invasive and non-invasive frameworks. That means, if you want to develop web application in servlet, nothing but in JWE, developing web applications in JWE by using servlet concept. Sir, what type of code are we writing generally? Class. Generally, people are writing this one only, na? Public class, my servlet, public class, my servlet, which implements servlet interface. So invasive means technology itself forcing us to implement their interfaces. Implemented their interfaces or extends their classes. For example, let me take one more class like my servlet, which extends of what here? Generic servlet. Which extends of generic servlet. Okay. And next one more way to developing web application. One more way to developing web application in the servlet. What is that? Class my servlet, which extends of what? HTTP servlet. Which extends of what? HTTP servlet. So whenever we developing any application, if we are forcing to implement or extends software provided classes, those frameworks we are calling as invasive framework. Spring is non-invasive, nothing but Spring never ever asking to extends my classes, implements our interfaces. Spring never telling like that. If you want, you can extend and implement. Otherwise, you can leave it. I'm going to take care. I'm going to take care means Spring framework itself taking care about our classes. If you are not writing, please be concentrate. If you are not writing any implements or extends, it is not a controller. It is not a controller. It is a normal class. This class doesn't having any capability to take the request. This class doesn't having any capability to give the response. When it will behave like a controller, see, controller means, see, we have a front controllers and controllers. Front controller means taking the request and giving the response. If we are not writing implements of servlet, what happened? This class unable to take the request and give the response. So in JEE, nothing but in advanced Java, we have to write like this. Without write like this, we can't developing any application. But if it comes to the Spring, simply if you're writing like this is sufficient. If you're writing like this is sufficient. It is automatically by adding one annotation at the rate of controller, at the rate of REST controller, at the rate of controller, at the rate of REST controller. By writing like this is sufficient. Our class will behave like a controller. Nothing but it can able to access the data from end user as well as give the response to the end user. Take the input and give the output. Take the request and give the response. So Spring is a non-invasive framework. That means Spring framework never forced to the programmer to implement or extends their software related interfaces and classes. One more time I'm repeating, guys. Before Spring framework, if you comes to the servlet, struts always forcing to developer extend my classes. But Spring never asking like that. If you want to write your classes individually, you can write it. No problem at all. So if, for example, if you don't know struts is very outdated concept a lot of years before. So people don't know struts. That's what I give an example related to what? Servlet. If you want to develop web application in servlet or by using servlet, what type of code are we writing? This code. Nothing but programmer must and should be write either these two words or these two words or these two words. This is called invasive. Must and should be either extends or implements. If it comes to the non-invasive, framework, no need to implement and extends. We'll see programmatically, we'll see in the SpringBoot. See guys, again I'm repeating, if anybody joined today, the people who are already attend yesterday and my demo session on Sunday, they know about me. The people who are attend today's sessions, okay, my intention is only one thing. Every class is useful to understand SpringBoot. Don't be think like this is a demo type class. You should be treated as it is one actual class of SpringBoot. Okay. Spring is open source framework. That means free of cost. Everybody can use it in every operating system. Okay. It was initially launched in the year of 2000, actually 2, and some modifications happened. Finally, I will give you history of Spring version history. I will tell you in 2004, Spring 1.0, 2.0, 3.0 and 4.0 and 5.0. These are the Spring versions. Why I'm writing Spring versions? Sir, if you once you know about the Spring versions, is there any importance to developing applications? No. Once we aware about the Spring versions, is that information useful to developing applications? No. But why I'm teaching here? Yes. Will you please concentrate? Guys, concentrate here. For every 2 years, one version released. In 2004, in 2006, and 2000. See here carefully. From 9 to 13, 4 years gap is there. From 9 to 13. 13 to 14, 4 years gap is there. See why this gap is increased to later 3, later 4. Why increased, sir? Yes, while developing 4th version, people can analyze. People means what? Spring software developers, Spring framework developers analyze limitations of the Spring. That's why Spring related people, nothing but Spring framework developer start development process of SpringBoot. Start development process of SpringBoot. See, every basic concept I'm teaching here. Initially, there is no concept like SpringBoot up to 2009, and people are keep on concentrate. Rod Johnson and its team only concentrate to developing and more qualified library in Spring only. But after few years, around 5 years, 6 years, Spring people got idea. What is that idea? We are going to learn. Okay. Based on that idea, they start development what here? SpringBoot. What is the limitation and what is that idea? We'll discuss. Okay, please be wait. Now, I told you Spring is a framework and Spring is non-invasive framework. Non-invasive framework means Spring framework never force us to either implements or extends Spring library. Spring library means what? People are confusing. Spring library means Spring framework interfaces and classes. Spring framework interfaces and classes. To understand this point clearly, I given one small example related to servlet. To understand that point clearly, I given small example to servlet. Okay. Now, next one is versatile framework. Versatile framework. For example, assume already I developed one project by using ORM framework like Hibernate. Already I am very much good at Hibernate analyzing like this. I developed by using Hibernate, I developed one project to interacting with the database, any database. Okay, any database. Now observe guys, I want see, but my web application, nothing but I want to develop presentation. I want to develop presentation service or business layers by using Spring. You can happily develop, man. Again, I'm repeating. Already I have a project by using Hibernate to developing what here? DAO layer. Already I developed. But ORM framework like Hibernate is only supported at the DAO layer. But I want to develop remaining layers also. So here remaining layers I developed by using Spring. What is that? Presentation layer, web layer, and service layer. I developed Spring. Already I have a project on top of the Hibernate. Then I want to make a communication between these two. Is it possible? Yes. That yes concept technically calling as versatile framework. Versatile framework means Spring can having the capability. Spring having the capability to communicating with ORM frameworks. To communicating with ORM and web frameworks. To communicating with ORM and web framework. This is what exactly calling as versatile. So first one is what is that guys here? First one is the open source. Second one is what? Non-invasive framework. Non-invasive framework means no need to extend or implement any interfaces and classes. And third one is what here? Versatile framework. So this is English type of terminology. Spring is the framework of frameworks. Framework of frameworks. Simply, or Hibernate can do, what is that? Developing DAO layer or DTO layer. And web application, Spring, simply you can say like Spring is equal to web framework plus ORM frameworks. Web frameworks plus ORM frameworks. Spring is the superset of other frameworks. Spring is the superset framework of other frameworks. Whatever the things we can able to develop with the help of struts and JSP, we can able to develop with the Spring. Whatever the things can be able to develop by using Hibernate, Toplink, Eclipse Link, Hibernate, Toplink, Eclipse Link, Opera, OpenJPA, IBATIS. All these things are developing what here? What is that? Database interaction layer. Simply you can say like a DAO layer. Those things also we can able to develop by using Spring. That's why people calling as Spring is the framework of frameworks. Nothing but it is the head of all the frameworks. It is the superset of all the frameworks. And after that, Spring is the loosely coupled framework. This one is very important to understanding our syllabus. This is very important to understand our syllabus. What is that? Spring is loosely coupled framework. That means, observe carefully. Initially, in 1.0 of a Spring, there are 7 modules. Spring framework developed modularized fashion. Okay. Yeah. See, observe here. Developed in the form of modularized fashion. That means each and every module is, see, I want to develop DO layer. For that purpose, one module. One module means a separate concept, a separate library, a separate concept or separate library. Okay. Now, one more thing. I want to develop basic standalone applications. For that purpose, I required one layer or one module. Spring core is the one module. Spring DAO, or some people calling it as Spring JDBC is one layer. Spring context layer means here module. Spring context is one module. Spring AOP. See guys, learning Spring means learning all these modules. Learning SpringBoot means learning all these modules only. Most of the people thinks like learning SpringBoot means a different framework we are going to learn. No, SpringBoot means it's a different way of learning Spring application only, a different way of developing Spring application only. But lot of new things we can able to develop REST. We can able to develop microservices with the help of SpringBoot. That is the advantage. We'll see. Don't worry. First, let me complete about the Spring overview. So Spring comes in the market in the form of modularized fashion. Modularized fashion, nothing but it is a collection of Spring framework is the collection of modules. How many modules? Initially 7, but later it will in 2.0 it will make it as a 6. What are those? Spring core. Again, I'm explaining what is what everything. Spring core, Spring DAO, Spring context, Spring AOP, Spring web, and Spring ORM. So like this, we have totally six modules. Nothing but module means a separate library, a separate, like in a simple layman terminology, you can say like a separate chapter. Okay. So Spring core, Spring DAO, Spring context, Spring AOP, Spring Web MVC, Spring ORM. Like this, mainly we have 6 modules. By using these 6 modules, we are going to develop end-to-end application of Spring. End-to-end application. Any application, end-to-end logics, nothing but from presentation to database interaction layer. Now, in the place of Spring DAO, Spring JDBC, and in SpringBoot, please be concentrated. Let me write these two in one area. In the place of Spring DAO and Spring JDBC, we are learning the concept like Spring Data JPA. We are learning the concept like Spring Data JPA, SpringBoot Data JPA. Here we have a SpringBoot Web MVC. Okay, SpringBoot Web MVC. Got it or not? So in Spring, we are learning these two separately. But in SpringBoot, we are not going to learn these two. For these two, we have an advanced level. Initially, what we have JDBC. Okay, JDBC concept we can overcome with the support of what DO and JDBC. I will show you everything theoretically. First, let me make perfectly. JDBC drawbacks like a boilerplate of code we can overcome with the Spring JDBC. Okay, and Hibernate related boilerplate of code we can able to develop some by using ORM. But still some problems are there. In Spring also some limitations are there. To avoiding these limitations, we are using Spring Data JPA in SpringBoot. We are learning Data JPA in SpringBoot. We'll discuss. So what is the meaning of loosely coupled framework? Loosely coupled framework means I want to develop web application. So I don't want to use all these things. I want to communicating with the only database. By using Spring, I want to develop one application to communicating with the only database. So you can avoid all the remaining modules. So what is the meaning of loosely coupled framework means? Spring framework never ever forcing us to learn all the modules. Spring framework never ever forcing us to learn all the modules. Whatever the modules you want to use to developing the application, you can learn it. I don't know what is web application. I don't know what is REST application. I don't want to develop web application. I want to develop basic Spring application. Standalone application I want to develop. Just a calculator application. Yes, you can able to develop by using Spring, by using core module. Sir, to developing standalone application, do I learn all these things? No. Spring never asking you to learn. If you want to develop standalone, learn all those things. If you want to develop web application, learn all those things. If you want to developing the database interaction, learn all these things. Framework never be tell like that. Never forced us to learn all the things. So whatever the module you want to learn, you can learn it. I want to develop only standalone application. Learning Spring Core is sufficient. I want to learn web application. Spring and Web MVC is sufficient to learn. I want to interacting with the database in the form of text format. Then go with the what? DO. I will discuss all these modules individually. And I'm going to write small coding snippets also. If I'm directly entering to the SpringBoot, definitely the topics will be bounced from our mind. So I make you people to understand. First, I'm preparing to understand the SpringBoot. That is my intention. And don't be think I'm wasting your time. Especially, I don't want to waste my valuable time. I'm busy with a lot of classes per day and along with my work. So I'm always trying to, already I told you, I have 11 plus years experience in this training. So I know how to teach. I know how to deliver the subject in an understandable format. I know student pulse, where the student will get the problem, where the student will get the confusion. So to fulfill all the students' doubts and minds, their queries, we will go with some flow. Okay, 1 or 2. Yesterday and today only basic, but tomorrow I'm introducing. But introducing that SpringBoot, Directly, if I'm teaching Spring Boot, you can't learn. Wordings will be new. So definitely, if the words will be new, definitely concept will be bounced from our mind. That's what I'm trying to prepare you people and make you in a particular position to understand the Spring Boot easily. That is our intention. Okay, but it is not a session to show my capability on the Spring, and this is not a session to show my capacity what I have on the Spring. Okay, just this is the path to understand. This is the proper direction to understand Spring Boot microservices course. Okay, so Spring, what we discuss in today's session, very few points. We have two types of frameworks initially: web framework, ORM framework. Okay, and after Spring arrival into the market, frameworks are classified into three types. And don't ask me like a testing framework, Selenium framework. So I'm talking related to development process. Okay, web framework, ORM framework, application development framework. ORM means only it will developing web layer and business layer. Web framework means, ORM means only developing DAO. Application framework means both web and ORM. Both web and ORM. And that means simply you can say, with the help of the Spring, we can able to develop end to end, presentation to what is that? DAO layer. And initially in some people writing like a 2002 and some people writing 2003. It's a 0.9 version that is not using by end user. That is not using by programmer to developing the application. So actual Spring usage starts from 2004. That is what your Spring 1.x. After that in 2006 second version, 2009 third version, and there is a gap, 4 years gap. Here 4 years gap. Okay. So in this 4 years gap, what happened? People are developing Spring Boot. In 2013, start development process of Spring Boot. Thinking about to start development process of Spring Boot. So in which year? In Spring 1.1. Spring Boot 1.0 in 2014. And Spring 2.0, current version is Spring 2.0, nothing but some subversions. 2.0, only 2 versions in the Spring Boot. In Spring, 5 versions. So people are start thinking to develop what is that? Spring Boot library. In 2014 they released, I will give you the date. In 2017, in the 2017 itself, Spring Boot came into the picture. Okay, now observe here. This is my Brave browser here. If you go with the Spring Boot history, Spring Boot version history, you can easily find out. Yeah, let me open it. What is this? Yeah, if you zoom this, see, if you're able to see or not, don't know. In 2014, Spring Boot 1.0 into the market. In 2017, Spring 2.0 came into the market. Okay, in 2014 and 2017. So actual releases of Spring Boot starts from 2014. So I hope you understand why I told you versions. Spring Boot is not available from first day itself. After releasing the versions of Spring Boot came into the picture. Why Spring Boot? That point we are going to discuss in tomorrow's session. Yeah, we have a lot of session. Wait for end of the session. So after that, I told you Spring is a non-invasive framework. That means Spring framework never forces us to develop. Spring framework never forces to develop what we can calling as never forces to develop classes by implementing what any interfaces and other classes. For example, if you want to develop my own servlet, I want to write like this, nothing but our classes must and should be implements a servlet library. Servlet library means servlet software, servlet technology provided classes and interfaces. Please be remember this point. Whenever I'm using jar file, whenever I'm using word like library, whenever I'm using like a predefined code, will you please remember it is the combination of API or library or jar or predefined code. Whenever I'm using this type of words, you have to think like collection of classes and interfaces. Okay, if you want to develop our own servlet, we must and should be implements servlet technology provided library, nothing but servlet technology provided interfaces and classes. But if it comes to the Spring, no need to write. If it comes to the Spring and Spring Boot, no need to write, no need to extend our classes. For example, this is my Spring class. Will you please observe? Will you please observe my student class? See, it's a simple class. Okay, it's a simple class. Let me open my MVC related class. Let me open my MVC related class, student admission controller class, some other batch related programs. See, did I write any implements and extends here? Did I write any implements and extend here? No, this is called non-invasive. Never force us to implement something. Never force us to extending something. That is called non-invasive. Okay, and versatile framework means Spring can able to communicating with any other frameworks, any web frameworks like JSF, Struts, any ORM framework like Hibernate, Toplink, OpenJPA, Eclipse Link, and IBAT is like that. A lot of what we can calling as ORM frameworks are there. From our Spring framework, we can able to develop other frameworks also. That is Spring framework. Spring is the framework of frameworks, nothing but superset of all the frameworks. If you combine all the web and ORM frameworks together, that is nothing but Spring only. Spring is loosely coupled framework, nothing but Spring actually developed in the modularized fashion, nothing but if you want to develop standalone applications, there is one module. If you want to develop web application, a separate module. If you want to develop some database interaction related application, one separate module. What is these two? We'll discuss these two. Most of the people getting the doubt. What is the use of Spring DA1 and JDBC to communicating with the database? What is the use of Spring ORM to communicating with the database? So most of the people, 99.99, especially freshers, having a lot of doubt on top of these two concepts. Both are communicating with the database. When do you prefer JDBC and when do you prefer ORM? When do you prefer Spring JDBC and when do you prefer Spring ORM? I will teach you, don't worry. Okay, so if I want to develop standalone application, I no need to learn all the modules. Spring core is enough. I want to develop what we can calling the web application, no need to develop remaining. Only Spring and Web MVC is sufficient. Spring Web MVC is sufficient. I want to interacting with the database, either DUO or ORM is sufficient. No need to learn all. That is called loosely coupled. Never force us to learn all the modules. Never force us to learn all the modules. Okay. Any new students in today's sessions? Any new student?
Yes.
Yeah. Are you comfortable with this explanation, Veena?
Yes, I am comfortable with the explanation.
Yeah, good.
But I have the background of core Java, advanced Java, and JDBC, and I'm very new to the Spring and Spring Boot, sir.
Very
so
new.
I want to, yes, I'm totally beginner level for Spring 2. I have 2 years of experience.
No problem, madam. Every point How you learn core Java? What is variable, what is comma, what is equal operator, what is package, what is class, what is interface. You learn like that, na?
Yes.
In the same manner, I'm going to teach Spring Boot.
Spring also I want to learn.
Then I'm taking a separate batch in the evening.
Okay.
And 2 more students also need Spring. So
Okay.
I'm conducting a separate batch for Spring in the evening time. In the morning time, Spring Boot.
Okay.
In the morning time, Spring Boot.
To learn the Spring Boot first, we need to have the knowledge about Spring, na?
See, that is the point. I'm not directly introduce the Spring Boot here. First, I'm explaining.
Okay.
First, I'm explaining. See, whatever the points you I told you, you understand or not?
Yes, and these are sufficient for understanding Spring Boot.
Yeah, yes,
Okay.
yes. This is sufficient. I will make you like that. I'm tune my classes like that.
Okay.
That is the that is the power of a trainer. Everybody teaching
Okay.
Spring Boot microservices.
Yes, yes.
But without knowing Spring, wherever we require Spring, to be honestly I'm speaking, we require Spring. But wherever concept is required from Spring Boot, that point we have to highlight. In Spring Boot, we have to spend 1 hour of time in Spring about the concept. In Spring Boot, I'm going to conclude within the 5 and 10 minutes. Later, jumped into the Spring Boot. Then only we can understand what we learn in Spring and what we are going to learn in Spring Boot. Blindly, if directly I'm telling Spring Boot, people think like it is a separate framework.
Yes, I also.
People think like it is a separate framework. No, it is the company given by who given Spring like Pivotal only. Okay, it is a different style. Otherwise, if you go through my documentation, you can understand. There I mentioned very clearly, Spring Boot is not a framework. Spring Boot is not a separate software. Spring Boot is a different library which is used to developing Spring-based applications. Okay, so don't bother if you don't know about the Spring. See, if I mold you like this, then only you are going to join the class and only I'm getting the money. Don't be think like that. Daily I have a lot of classes. Okay, so whatever the things happen in coming classes, that thing only I'm telling. I never ever telling any lies. Okay, if you are concentrate and attending the classes regularly and concentrating on each and every statement and minute, then without having proper idea on Spring, you can learn Spring Boot. Okay. So in the meanwhile, in the next week only, I'm conducting Spring classes. So don't worry. In the meanwhile, we can build up our Spring knowledge also. Don't worry. In depth of microservices. Otherwise, see, I will show you. See, everything I'm going to show you with proofs. Don't believe the words. See, generally, how I'm working with teaching other classes, you understand. See, this is entire basics of Spring Boot. After that, Spring MVC. After that, Spring REST. Once we good at Spring REST, we can able to understand Spring Boot. See, all this, Spring, especially microservices. Once we able to understand Spring Boot MVC, Spring Boot basics and Spring REST, then final chapter is microservices. In the microservices, I'm going to teach each and every, around 15 programs I'm going to teach. 15 programs I'm going to teach. It's very simple. Microservices means people thinks like it is a different and a difficult one. Different and difficult one. Let me give you a quick idea. Microservices means very simple. Let me show you one thing. Very brief idea. There are two applications. One is cost of product, and the one is total cost. Cost of product, and the one is total cost. total cost, all the product cost, individual product cost. This is the all the, for example, I purchased 10 products. Then what is the cost? In normally in monolithical architecture, nothing but without microservices, either SpringBoot, whatever it may be. In monolithical, mono means everything we are writing. This is one service basically. This is one service, service one, and this is one service. People writing these two as one program. People writing these two as a one program. In microservices, this is one separate program and this is one separate program. Individually, we are developing the programs. These programs are maintaining by registry, service registry. This is, you can calling as Eureka server. Eureka server. Netflix is given. Netflix library. And next one is gateway. See, very briefly, the reason is in the Sunday session, course explanation session, Ben also asked me, gateway. This is called Joule proxy. Joule proxy. See, please be, don't be talk, guys. Observe here. Without microservices, what happened? People are directly developing all the things within the one application. In microservices, every service is one application. These services are managed by server. And these entry points, URL points, endpoints, everything we are maintaining with the help of gateway. So the combination of gateway, Eureka server, and Eureka clients is nothing but microservices. In SpringBoot, everything we are writing within the one project. In microservices, separate projects. Separate projects. For example, if you take what is that? Amazon.in, product cost, booking product, add to cart, track the product, maintaining user details, generating invoice. All the things are writing within the one project. So after developing this project, we are wrapping as a jar or where later we are dumped into one server. What happened? Whatever the services available in the Amazon.in, all the services are available in the one server only. So you can make the request to same server. I am also making a request to same server, and Ben is also making a request to same server, and Srini is also making a same server. All the services are available in one project. That's why every request is going to one project only. That means number of requests are increasing. That is what happened. Server may be crashed and performance issues will be rises. To overcome that problem, what we people are doing now, microservice, add to cart, one application, tracking product, one application, generating bill, one application, maintaining user details, one application. So all the services are developing individually, and finally we are grouping. How we are grouping? Inter-REST communication. For example, I'm purchasing one t-shirt. So this cost of product application giving 100 rupees. Totally I'm purchasing 5 products. So 100 into 5. So whatever the response given by this service, this response is giving to another service. Then we will get total. So one service is communicating with the another service. That is called inter-service communication. Internal service communication, external server communication. So simply to understand microservice means, in the monolithical approach, nothing but our basic approach, every services we are developing as a one project. In microservices, we are not developing everything in one project. We are developing all the services in different projects. And after developing different projects, we are going to group all the projects. Where we are going to group, how to maintaining all these different services by using Eureka server. This is a brief diagram about microservices. It is the brief diagram about microservices. In monolithical architecture, every service we are writing as a single project. In microservice architecture, microservice means it is just architecture. It is not a software. It is not a framework. See, front controller is one architecture. Singleton design pattern, it is one architecture. Microservice, you can say like a design pattern. Microservice, it is one design pattern. Microservice, it is one architecture. So what microservice architecture is telling? Hey, Mr. Ram, don't combine all the service. That is the load burden. Load burdens means what? If multiple requests are increasing, then automatically performance will be reduced. Performance will be reduced. If I'm give you 100 cases of bag to bring from shopping mall to our supermarket to house, it will difficult. Bringing 100 kgs of bag is difficult. From bringing from supermarket to house. For example, the same 100 kgs, if you are partitioned into 10 kgs in each bag, so simply you can carry 20 kgs, 20 kgs, 20 kgs, 20 kgs easily. That is reduce the load burdens. Reduce what here? Load burdens. So microservice is also same thing. Instead of writing all the services one project, writing the services into individual project, that is called microservice. So this is the brief, in-depth explanation you are going to see in coming classes. Are you comfortable, Abdul?
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm more comfortable. I understand clearly.
Yeah. See, why people are getting confusion, you know? First of all, the word is new. If the experience, no problem. Word is new. And also people think like whenever developer listening any word, think like that is a separate software. Think like that is a separate framework. Think like that is given by a different organization. So nothing is there. It's just a library. And it's just architecture to announcing us. Don't write all the service in one area. Better to separate. Whenever one service wants to communicating with another service, you can able to communicate it just by method calling. Simply like method calling. For understandability purpose, I'm telling like method calling, but different concept is there, we'll see. So Ben is also asked the same question on Sunday about when I was teaching about course content, he was asked the same question. I think so now Ben is also satisfied with this explanation.
Yeah, one more small clarification. Maybe
yes, sure.
I'm a little bit earlier to asking this. For every model, we need to use separate database. That there also.
Yeah, very good question. Basically, what is the advantage of the microservice? This is what cost of the product. This is what total cost. 2 services. Now I'm developing by using Java. Now I'm developing by using .NET. By using what? .NET. So you can use Java. You can use .NET to developing these services related application. Maybe this application can communicating with what? Same database. Please be concentrate. Abdul, very fantastic question you asked. The people who are working, those people can only getting these type of doubts. Sir, is this REST applications communicating with the databases? See, these applications communicating with either single database or multiple database. This application can communicating with a single database or multiple database. If you observe my screen once, see, there is a concept like a strict circuit breaker. A strict circuit breaker. This is the part of microservices only. Here I'm going to tell you how our SpringBoot application, SpringBoot microservice application will communicating with the multiple databases. So according to our doubt, our service may communicating with a single database or maybe communicating with a multiple database. That is entirely depend upon client requirement. We are not. See, in this time, programmer and team lead is not a responsible person. Programmer and team lead is not a responsible person to take single database, to take multiple database. Everything is responsible by what? The decision taking by client and his team. Client and his team only. Got Abdullah?
Yeah, got it. But
Yeah.
but I hear mostly we must use separate database. That's why I got it.
Sorry.
We must use separate database. You said maybe that is a client call. Maybe they can use separate database or same database. Am I right?
Yeah.
But in some point I heard like for every model we need to must to use separate database.
See, that is I'm telling. See, that is depend upon how we are architect the project.
Okay.
How we are architect the project. Client asking like I don't require. Then what we can do? Client asking, yes, I need 3 database. Definitely we should provide. That's why I did show you. This type of scenario will coming into our real life in the IT company. That's what there is a concept like a strict circuit breaker. In this example, I'm going to teach you how our application will communicating with the 2 databases. So whatever the point you hear, that is correct only. Sir, will communicating with the multiple, but that is not a rule. Okay. That is not a rule. If you want to use multiple, you can use it. Or if you want to happy with the only one database, you can go with that. That is the thing.
Clearly. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. So whenever you asking doubts, I never bother about the timing. My explanation is keep on going. Like hair, how the hair is moving without any obstacles like that. My flow is going on. So if I'm taking more time, don't be scold me internally. Okay. So I'm going to wind up this session. Again, we are going to meet tomorrow morning at exactly 8:30. Thank you guys. Have a nice time. God